Hi everyone, I've got a new filter. In fact, I've had it for a couple of weeks and I actually used it in my last video, but I didn't talk about it. So I thought I'd rectify that and talk about it now. It's a reverse ND graduated filter. And in this video, I'll talk about what it is, what it's useful for, and whether I think it's a useful addition to my filter kit and maybe yours. I hope you'll enjoy the video. If you do and you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. So a couple of quick disclaimers about this. The first one is I like using ND grads. I know a lot of people don't. I know there's a general feeling that they're not necessary, and strictly speaking they're not. It's very easy to merge exposures to get the same effect. But there are times when I think they're useful, and even when merging is just as easy, I do like using the filter. There's something satisfying about fitting the filter and seeing the exposure come together as one single image in the camera rather than bracketing and merging them later. The other disclaimer I have to make is I didn't buy the filter that I'm reviewing today. You may have seen in some of my previous videos I've been doing some collaboration with K&F Concept, and they did send me this filter through to review. In fact, they actually offered me a different filter to review, but I didn't think I could do anything useful with that. So I suggested this one because it's a filter that I've been quite intrigued with. So what is it? Well, it's a reverse ND grad. But before we come on to what that is, I'll just talk a little bit about the initial impressions. It comes in quite a nice box. All of the K&F Concept stuff that I've had seems to be very nicely packaged. It's a nice solid box with like a magnetic kind of clasp and hinge. Inside we have a kind of two-tone leather look pouch, which when you lift it up and pulls the filter up and out, which is nice. The filter itself is glass. It's 150 millimeters tall, 100 millimeters wide and 2 millimeters thick. And it is 3 stops at its darkest point. This should fit into pretty much all straightforward 100 millimeter filter systems. So not just the K&F Concept one, I used it with my existing filter system and it fitted absolutely fine. So, what is a reverse ND grad? Well, let's start off by talking about a standard ND grad, which is this. This is one of my existing ones. This is actually a resin one rather than glass. And a standard, actually we use this one as a better example perhaps because it's easier to see. An ND grad basically is dark at one end and clear at the other. They come in various levels of darkness. This one is 3 stops or 0.9, and the transition between dark and clear determines the type of filter. This one has a very sharp transition, so it's a hard edge. Typically you use these when you've got a very bright sky and quite a dark foreground, and you use this by putting the horizon or putting the edge, the transition across the horizon to darken the sky and leave the foreground brighter so that you can balance the exposure more, so it's in high contrast scenes. And they work really well, and as I said, I like using them. But there is one kind of fundamental issue with them if you're shooting sunrises and sunsets, because this will darken the sky uniformly. In other words, it's 3 stops, so the entire sky will be darkened by 3 stops. But if you're photographing a sunrise or a sunset, the brightest part of the sky is the bit immediately above the horizon. Once you get further up, the sky gets darker. So you end up darkening parts of the sky that you don't really want to. And that is where the reverse grad comes in. Again, this is 3 stops. It has a fairly hard transition across the horizon. It's darkest just above that transition, and then it gradually gets lighter as you go further up the filter. So it doesn't darken the top of the sky as much as it does the bottom. And that intrigues me. So I actually used this in my last photo shoot when I was at Playa de los Estudiantes beach, and I used it with the sunrise shot. But what you didn't see was before I actually shot that final sunrise image, I did a quick bit of rushing around where I tried several different filters to do a comparison. And what I'm going to do is show you the unedited raw files of the 3 test shots that I did. I say unedited, the only thing they've had done to them is the lens corrections. Other than that, I've done nothing. But I think it shows an interesting indication of how this filter can work in very, very bright contrasty scenes, which I had then, and you'll see that when I show you the raw files. So my first image was shot with the 3-stop hard-edged ND grad in. So let's go and have a look at that in Lightroom. Okay, so here's my image in Lightroom. All of the images you're about to see were shot with exactly the same settings. So if I look at this, you can immediately see, even with the 3-stop hard-edged ND grad pulled all the way down to the horizon, the whole area, the sun is kind of over here somewhere, but that whole area is completely blown out. If I look at the histogram, I couldn't have brought the exposure back much further because I'm just about to clip the shadows in the darkest parts, which would have been down in the rocks here, and I wanted to be able to recover that. And if I look at the highlights, you can see they're completely blown out. And if I click on that, that whole area is just white. There's no information there. There's nothing to recover there. The rest of the sky, yeah, we could probably recover some over here reasonably well. And the rest of the sky doesn't look too bad. And there's plenty of detail there. But clearly this is not going to be a usable image. So what I did then was what I would have done historically is I stacked 2 filters, a 3-stop and 2-stop hard-edged ND grad, both with the transition dragged down to the horizon. So let's go and have a look at that raw file in Lightroom. Okay, so again, exactly the same settings, and again, nothing's been done to this apart from the lens corrections. But here we can see, actually if we look at the histogram first of all, it's a nice histogram. There's no clipped shadows, there's no blown highlights. I can now see the sun, I can see the kind of the clouds in the background, I can see the textures from that kind of little bit of hazy cloud that was around there. Some nice detail in there. So that looks pretty nice. If I just click on the highlights warning, the only bit of blown highlights is just that tiny little bit of the sun there, which, you know, isn't a big deal. But look at the rest of the sky. Look at the top of the sky, you know, the darker areas in the corners here. This is not vignetting. This is just where the sky is darkest naturally in the frame. And because I've got 5 stops of filtration going on up here, it's very, very dark. It's recoverable, and I would have had no problems in the past, you know, just using gradient filters in Lightroom or doing something in Photoshop to brighten that part of the sky up. But it's a shame that that whole area is so dark when it doesn't need to be. So what I did then was I took out the 3-stop hard-edged, I left in the 2-stop hard-edged, and I put in the 3-stop reverse grad. Let's have a look at the raw file for that. Okay, again, same settings, nothing done apart from lens corrections. And looking at the histogram, it's good. No clipped shadows, no blown highlights. Looking across here, I can see the sun, I can see all the patterns in the sky here from that hazy cloud. But look at the top of the sky there, so much brighter. That really dark, almost but not quite clipped shadow in the darker parts of the sky is gone, because although I've got 5 stops of filtration going on in the bottom part of the sky, by the time I get up to the top I may only have 4 or maybe 3, something like that. It's a job to know, to be 100% sure, but it's certainly not darkening the top part of the sky, which is the area that I don't really need darkening that much. So for me, that's the advantage of this filter. It means that I'm not unnecessarily having to brighten the top of the sky when I don't need to. It's probably not a major issue for just a normal, slightly bright sky. You know, if you're shooting maybe shortly before sunrise, before that that sort of horizon layer gets very, very bright. But if you're shooting with very high contrasts, which I do a lot of when I'm photographing seascapes in the morning, we very often get very, very high contrast scenes, and 3 stops just doesn't cut it. So using 5 stops on the horizon isn't that unusual for me, but it means if I use my new reverse grad, I no longer have to worry about it over darkening the top of the sky. A couple of other things to add. This is quite an affordable filter compared to some of the other big names. It's not cheap, but it's not overly expensive. Looking at the images that I shot with my other filters and with this filter, there's no loss of quality. The images look the same in terms of fine detail, and actually this has less of a color cast than my Lee filters, which is interesting. So would I recommend this? Well, if you like using grads, if you like shooting sunrises and sunsets, and if you often find yourself with very, very contrasty scenes to shoot, yes, it's a great filter. It's going to be in my kit bag from now on whenever I'm out, or whenever I've got my grads with me. And I'm very grateful to K&F Concept for sending it through. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please give it a like, share it on social media. Don't forget about leaving me a comment down below. Oh, I should say, there is a link in the video description for this filter and a discount code as well, so you can get a little bit of money off if you decide you want to buy one. If you've enjoyed this video and you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. And as always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, so thank you very much. And until the next video, bye.